One thing that I have learned from studying the Bible over the past 40 years or so is that these books and letters that form what we call God's Word were not written in a vacuum. And what I mean by that, they were written by someone. They were written either to another person or to a group of people. They were written with a purpose. They were written in a culture. And all different things transpired to make these letters and these books that we have to be what they are. And to understand them, many times you have to understand these things. You need to understand who wrote it, why it was written, who it was written to, how they would have understood it, to really help bring out the meaning in these books. And as I've studied the Bible, there's been several passages in the Bible that, honestly, I've struggled with. I've struggled in trying to grasp their meaning. And one of those passages is John chapter 15. I've really struggled over the years to really connect with that chapter. And I kind of feel like I'm alone because I've heard a lot of people talk about chapter 15 and how they just love chapter 15 and how it means so much to them. And I've struggled with it. Well, I decided to take a fresh look at it. And I want to share with you some things I've come to realize about it today. Let's turn to John chapter 15 together this morning. And we're going to look at the first 17 verses. John 15, starting in verse 1. Jesus begins. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes that it'll be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he lays down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command. Love each other. In chapter 14, John told his disciples that he is leaving. He knows he is just hours from the cross, and in a few short hours, he's going to be nailed to the cross, and he's going to die, and he's going to leave them. And now in chapter 15, he encourages them, even though this is going to happen, to remain or abide with me. He knew that in a few short hours, these men's lives were going to be rocked. I mean, they had given up everything to follow him. They had left their families and their homes. They had left their careers or professions to follow Jesus. And when he's hanging from the cross, they're going to feel like fools. Embarrassed and angry. Embarrassed at themselves. Angry at the world. And angry at God. They're going to be despondent. And they're going to feel like running away. And now on this night of all nights, Jesus tells them that they need to abide with him. And he's saying, you need to stick with me, even though all this is going to happen. The word abide or remain, depending on the translation you're using, it has the sense of making a home. When I read that, when I see that word, I think about what it says about Jesus in John chapter 1, verse 14, that he came and he pitched his tent among us. I mean, that's literally what the Greek says there. In other words, Jesus did make a quick visit to earth. He came and he stayed with us, and he lived with us for an extended period of time. For years, I really think I missed the true meaning of what Jesus was trying to say in John chapter 15. But I think I'm starting to figure it out. Jesus' discourse here on the vine and the branches, it's about love and his desire for a relationship with us. And that shouldn't surprise us, because the Bible is a love story. It's the story of a love that a God has for his creation and his desire to commune with it. But it's also a tragic love story. God knows the pain of being spurned by those he loves. I was so focused on Jesus' comments about pruning and burning that I believe I missed his emphasis on his love for us. Here in these passages, what I see Jesus saying is he's saying, I want a relationship with you. He's saying, I'm leaving tomorrow, but we can still be close and we can still love one another. One of the problems I believe people have with Christianity is they don't see it as a love-filled relationship. They concentrate too much on the pruning and burning, or on what they can't have, or what they have to do. And that's not what being a Christian is all about. Being a Christian is about living in a loving, covenantal relationship with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. That is the very essence of Christianity. It's about our relationship with God through his Son, Jesus. And we have trouble understanding the relationship part. We're kind of like this. We're like someone who gets married but doesn't want to change or adjust his lifestyle to benefit his new relationship. Every relationship has needs that needs to be met and duties to perform if that relationship is going to work. I mean, when you get married, you can't just come and go as you please. That was an adjustment for me when I first got married. I now had a wife, and she was a single mom, and she had a child, and I just couldn't pick up and go here or there where I wanted to go because of my relationship with them. There were expectations in that relationship. Denise had expectations. Shara, her daughter, had expectations. I had expectations. And so things have to change. Things had to change in my life. And changing and compromising to meet these needs and these expectations in the relationship, that is the natural and proper response. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about obeying his commands. In verse 10, he says, if you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. There in verse 10. Did you get the connection there? Jesus is not saying, obey me or else. He said, look, guys, I'm my Father's son because I obeyed him. I remained in his love because I obeyed him. And I don't think anybody would accuse Jesus of being in a master-servant relationship with the Father. And he says, if you obey my commands, you'll remain in my love too. In verse 14, he says, you are my friends. You get that? You are my friends if you do what I command. But we must understand as we look at these, as Jesus talks about obeying in the right context. It's of a person trying to please someone with whom they're in an intimate relationship with. This is not a master-servant relationship. You are my friends if you do what I command. It's more like a spouse trying to please his or her mate. I mean, there are, like I said, expectations in that relationship. I noticed shortly after I got married with Denise, she'd get really aggravated at me when I didn't take the trash out. I grew up in a house where the children took the trash out. That was our responsibility. And so I grew up taking the trash out all the time as a kid. I'm an adult now. I'm married. We even have a 5-year-old. That's old enough to take the trash out. They can take a trash out.
They don't look bad.
And I realized one day, in Denise's house growing up, her dad always took the trash out. Kind of slipped out from her one day. And all of a sudden it hit me. She saw me taking the trash out as showing love to her. Can you believe something so simple can be equated with love? And that's where that expectation. And so, I got to qualify this. I gladly take the trash out. I do slip up every now and then. But I try, okay? Also, I noticed this when we got married. I had a shirt I really liked. It was brown with white polka dots on it.
No.
I wore that shirt on quite a few dates when I was dating Denise. And I came home one day, shortly after we got married, and I noticed that shirt was missing from my closet. She admitted a few years ago that she hated that shirt. She threw it away. But see, there's that, let me say this. I will gladly trade that shirt for my relationship with her. Because I get more out of my relationship with her than I do from that shirt. And doing these things to please your spouse is natural. It's the right thing to do. It's the logical thing to do. And it's not by accident that Paul connects the relationship between Christ and the church to marriage. The relationship between a husband and a wife in Ephesians chapter 5. It is finding the proper motivation for these changes that Christ demands in our lives that we have trouble with as Christians. Because so many times we tend to act out of guilt, we act out of fear, and we act out of obligation instead of acting out of love. The right and only true motivation in Christianity is love. God loved us first. And He demonstrated that through His Son, Jesus Christ. This thing that we do every Sunday, it's a reminder of His love to us. And obedience for the sake of Christ's love is the logical and emotional motivation within our lives. Denise's love for me is my motivation to change, to meet the expectations of our relationship. I have to ask you why she loves me. That's one of the greatest mysteries for me. Because I don't understand it. And she's loved me. It'll be 35 years tomorrow that she has loved me. That's our anniversary tomorrow. We've been married 35 years. It seems just like yesterday to me. How would you feel if your wife or husband refused to consider you and your feelings and your needs? I can tell you that relationship would be heading to divorce. God is, and here's the sad thing. God is used to us treating Him that way. Matthew 23:37. Jesus in chapter 23, He finally had enough. And He lays into the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders, and He's rebuking them. And He says some pretty strong things to them. But He gets to verse 37, And I hear the emotion in this. He says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." You hear the love there? You hear the desire for a relationship? Turn with me to Hosea chapter 11. Hosea chapter 11. We're going to look at the first 8 verses. I want you to listen. I want you to hear God's cry in these verses. His love. His heartache. Verse 1. When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt I called my child. But the more I called Israel, the further they went from me. They sacrificed to the Baals, and they burned incense to images. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms. But they did not realize it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness and with ties of love. I lifted the yoke from their necks and bent down to feed them. Will you not return to Egypt? And will not Assyria rule over them because they refuse to repent? Swords will flash in their cities and destroy the bars of their gates and put an end to their plans. My people are determined to turn from me. Even if they call to the Most High, He will by no means exalt them. Listen to this now. How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? How can I treat you like Admah? How can I make you like Zebulun? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused. Do you hear the love and the heartache in those words from God as He's talking to His people? And He's crying out to them. But they don't listen. And eventually God did divorce them. Love is costly. And it's not without risk. God laid it all on the line with Jesus. God allowed His heart to be vulnerable when He sent His Son to this world. I think one of the reasons that man has such trouble accepting God is we've had our hearts stepped on by men way too many times. And that makes it hard for us to accept, to love, and also to accept unconditional love. And over time, we develop a deep fear of being rejected and getting our heart hurt. Especially when we've been hurt by so many people. And you got to ask this question, if love is so risky and so demanding, why do we seek it? Because the payoff is so rich. I mean, I look at my relationship with Denise and I wouldn't trade it for anything. She makes me smile. But see, God put His heart on the line for us when Jesus went for the cross. He laid it out there for us to trample on it and to hurt Him. But He was willing to do that because of His desire for His relationship with us. Back in John chapter 15, verse 11. Jesus said this, "I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." You know what the payoff of abiding with Jesus is? It's joy. Joy is not a command. Joy is a fruit that develops in our lives as a result of being with Jesus, of remaining or abiding with Him as He talks about, and obeying Him as He wants us to do. I think in the past I got caught up in verse 8, where verse 8 says we need to bear much fruit. And I'm looking at that and I'm worrying, am I bearing the right kind of fruit? Or am I bearing enough fruit? But as I look at this passage new again, it hit me. Joy is the only fruit that we need to be worrying about. If you have the joy of Jesus in your life, all the other fruit comes naturally. It is through, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're sharing your faith with others, because if you have the joy of Jesus in your life, you're going to want to share. You're going to want to share what you have and what you know. I mean, that's why I talk about my relationship with Denise. Because of what I have in it. And we'll do the same thing with Jesus. You won't worry about whether your ability to love others or serving in the body, because if you have the joy of Jesus, you're going to want to love other people. You want to love other Christians. You want to serve other Christians. You're going to want to serve in the body. It's just a natural response. And so with this understanding, the words of Jesus in verses 9 and 10, I think, really come into focus. Verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I've obeyed my Father's command and remain in his love. Did you know there's no threat in that verse? I think for years I heard a threat in that verse. There's no threat there. That's an invitation. It's not, obey me or I won't love you. And that's the way we are. That's the way we are in this world. But that's not Jesus. This is an invitation for someone who has longed for a relationship with man ever since we broke the covenant in the garden with him in Genesis chapter 3. It's an invitation to come home. It's an invitation to join the Father and his Son as a family. I think we're all familiar with the story of the prodigal son. The son that demanded his inheritance from the father, and he left and he spent it all. Ended up in the pig pen. Remember that story? And it's not just a story, though. It's reality. It's God's reality. That's his story. He's been standing at the door for centuries waiting for us to come home. Not to a scolding, or to discipline or punishment. He's been waiting for us to come home for a feast. When the prodigal son came home, he didn't get a tongue lashing. You know what he got? Hugs and kisses from his father. He got a new robe put on him, a ring, and new sandals. And then the father killed the fatted calf, and they feasted in celebration of his return. This is what the father said. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Today, God is standing in his door looking for each of us. He's longing to kill the fatted calf and celebrate our return. Can you see him there? Can you see him at the door of heaven, looking out, longing for us to come home? That's God. That's our God. Don't you think God has waited long enough? Jesus is saying, won't you come and make your home with us? Abide with me, and I will abide with you. And so as we stand and sing today, we want to invite you to come home to the one who is longing today for your return. Why don't you come while we stand and sing?